1 year after Professor Charles Xavier left Earth, the X-Men continue their mission to defend mutants and humans alike. Bishop has joined the team, and Jean Grey has become pregnant. Support for mutants has grown, and the X-Men have become legally sanctioned by the United Nations. The X-Men save a young mutant, Roberto da Costa, from the Friends of Humanity. Seeing that they were outfitted with Sentinel tech, Jean probes Henry Peter Gyrick's mind for the location of the Sentinel's creator, Bolivar Trask. Jean receives a horrifying premonition while doing so. The team find Trask at a junkyard in the Sahara, where he is rebuilding his Sentinels with the aid of a lobotomized master mold. The X-Men defeat the Sentinels and apprehend Trask. Cyclops and Jean ponder leaving the team so that their son can be raised away from mutant hatred. The following day, Magneto reveals that Xavier willed him control of the Institute, entrusting him with leading the X-Men. Cyclops and Jean stay to keep an eye on Magneto. He sends mutants to Genosha for protection, while detaining members instead of killing them. The X-Men try adjusting to Magneto's leadership, with Bishop and Cyclops uneasy, while Rogue sympathizes with Magneto's struggles. UN forces led by Valerie Cooper arrive at the X-Mansion to arrest Magneto. Magneto decides to surrender peacefully, hoping to gain the trust of everyone by doing so. During his trial, there is an assault on the building. Their leader attempts to shoot a depowering radiation blast at Magneto, but Storm takes the hit for him. Magneto stops the assault, after which the UN grants him a pardon. Meanwhile, Jean goes into labor. Jean gives birth to a son, whom she names Nathan. When Beast informs Storm that the radiation blast has depowered her permanently, she leaves the team. While discussing Storm's decision, the X-Men are surprised by the arrival of a woman who looks identical to Jean. The X-Men take in the Jean look-alike, and Beast determines that she is the real Jean. Mr. Sinister contacts Jean and reveals her to be a clone. Sinister asserts his control of the clone Jean, and she transforms into the Goblin Queen, taking Nathan with her. The Goblin Queen subjects the X-Men to horrific visions before the real Jean awakens and confronts her clone telepathically. Morph leads the X-Men a laboratory, where they find Sinister afflicting Nathan with a virus, in the hope that it will turn him invulnerable. Jean again confronts the Goblin Queen, reminding her of all the memories they share, both good and bad. The Goblin Queen turns against Sinister, but Nathan is left gravely infected by the virus. Jean and Cyclops send Nathan to the future with Bishop in the hope of finding a cure there, while the Goblin Queen leaves, taking on a new name. In a bar in Texas, Storm meets Forge, who tells her he can restore her powers. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Jubilee and Roberto are transported into a video game by Mojo. Jubilee quickly takes to the idea of fighting Sentinels and other enemies in this video game world, practically begging to stay so that she can have a little bit of fun. She decides that it is best to leave the video games when she realizes how dangerous it actually is. With the help of a digital copy of Jubilee from the game's beta version, the pair fight their way through the game and defeat Mojo before Spiral sends them back to the real world. Afterward, Jubilee kisses Roberto. Meanwhile, Storm heads to Forge's ranch to undergo a procedure meant to restore her powers. Forge has mutant powers that allow him to create any machinery, and he believes that he can restore her powers. However, the procedure failed. After he admits to inventing power-nullifying technology, an enraged Storm tries to leave only to be attacked by adversary. Cyclops and Jean have grown distant. Worsening matters, she discovers he has been communicating with Madeline and begins to develop feelings for Wolverine. After Genosha is admitted into the UN, Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit head to the country, where the latter pair reunite with Madeline and Nightcrawler, while Magneto meets with the Genoshan Council, who wish to make him their leader. He agrees on the provision that Rogue serve alongside him. After telling Gambit about the plan and admitting to having previous history with Magneto, Rogue declines Magneto's proposal during the inauguration gala. Cable arrives to warn the X-Men of an impending attack but is sent back to the future. The Wild Sentinel appears and leads a group of Sentinels in attacking Genosha, seemingly killing Madeline and other mutants. Magneto and Gambit sacrifice themselves to protect the Morlocks and destroy the Wild Sentinel, respectively, leaving Rogue heartbroken. The professor refuses to renounce his memories of the X-Men in order to marry Lilandra, who he has been with all this time. Xavier's refusal to renounce his memories of the X-Men results in a battle between the Royal Guard and Deathbird until Xavier pulls everyone into the astral plane to educate them on coexistence. Upon receiving a psychic vision of Gambit's death, the professor calls off the engagement and requests that he be returned to Earth as soon as possible. In Arizona, Storm and Forge search for a rare cactus to cure Forge of the poison from the adversary's bite. Storm finds the cactus in a cave, but when she is cornered by the adversary, she overcomes her fears and regains her powers to defeat the adversary. Shortly after returning home, Storm and Forge learn of Master Mold's attack on Genosha, which is revealed to have been orchestrated by Mr. Sinister as part of his plan to instigate a war between humans and mutants. As the X-Men hold a funeral for Gambit, Rogue angrily searches for Jirich and Trask. After gaining information from Ross and Captain America, Rogue finds Jirich in Mexico and absorbs his memories. Jirich is killed later that night by a mysterious man who is working with Sinister. While helping in the recovery efforts at Genosha, the X-Men are contacted by Trask, who tells them that he is in Madripoor. They get Rogue on the way. In Madripoor, the X-Men learn that Sinister and a mysterious organization have been developing a highly advanced Sentinel program. Rogue drops Trask to his death, activating programming that turns him into a human Sentinel hybrid. Cable arrives, defeats Trask, and explains that Sinister is working with a greater threat that they must stop. This threat is Bastion, who reveals to Sinister that the Professor is alive in space and that Magneto, presumed dead in the Genosha attack, is also alive and is Bastion's prisoner. The UN reveals to the world that the Professor is alive, causing anti-mutant riots to break out across the United States. Following a lead from the future, Cyclops, Jean, and Cable travel to Pennsylvania. They learn that Bastion was conceived after his father was infected with a techno-organic virus, creating a human-machine hybrid that is more evolved than the Sentinels, Master Mold, and Nimrod. Bastion reveals how he is turning humans into Prime Sentinels like Trask 2. Prime Sentinels activate around the world, attack mutants, capture Jubilee and Roberto, and burn down the Professor's school. A horrified Cooper releases Magneto, who travels to the North Pole and uses his abilities to emit a massive electromagnetic pulse, shutting down electricity around the world and disabling all the Prime Sentinels in the process. Later, the Professor returns to Earth and summons the X-Men to him, realizing that Magneto has declared war on humanity. As the X-Men reunite, they split into two teams, a blue team led by Cyclops and a gold team led by Storm and Jean. Cyclops' blue team searches for Magneto, while Storm and Jean's gold team heads to Bastion's hideout in the Galapagos Islands, with less than 12 hours left before the Prime Sentinels are reactivated. Magneto returns with Asteroid M to offer the X-Men a new home. Rogue and Roberto accept his offer and join him before they leave. Gold Team arrives at Bastion's hideout, where they battle Mr. Sinister and an army of Sentinels. Meanwhile, Blue Team confronts Magneto, Rogue, and Roberto. Jean is suddenly attacked by Cable, who is controlled by Sinister. The Professor mentally immobilizes Magneto before Cyclops stops him after receiving a mental image of Jean fighting against Cable. Magneto recovers and traps the Professor, but when Wolverine stabs him, he uses his powers to remove the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. Shortly after Magneto critically injures Wolverine, the Professor uses his telepathic powers to override Magneto's mind and shut down the EMP. The Prime Sentinels are reactivated and continue wreaking havoc around the world. Just as Bastion prepares to execute Cable, Jean reemerges as Phoenix and places the collar on Bastion, immediately deactivating the Prime Sentinels. She then takes away Sinister's powers and control over Cable before the Phoenix Force disappears. Gold Team arrives on Asteroid M in a Sentinel to join Blue Team in the fight. Missiles are launched by the U.S. military that bombard Asteroid M. Bastion is killed as the asteroid descends back to Earth. The X-Men stop the asteroid from crashing. Magneto regains consciousness and sends the asteroid back into space before it explodes. Cyclops and Jean end up in 3960 AD, where they encounter a child Nathan. Meanwhile, the others find themselves in ancient Egypt in 3000 BC.